Just because a movie has an ending, it doesn't mean that it's the right one. Long have film fans pored over elusive alternate endings and their mysteries, wondering what might have been had the filmmakers opted for a different choice. And that goes especially for films in the horror genre, because there have been a good number of horror movies over the years that have found themselves tagged with disappointing, baffling, or downright ill-judged endings. Either the studio chickened out and opted for a safer choice, or it was deemed to be too dark or too confusing, and pushed out in favour of something a bit more palatable instead. But we hate palatable, and we will not stand for this, so let's go digging around the world of cut-up finishes and bad final sequences and see what we could have had if we were living in a far better parallel dimension instead. Thank God for the multiverse. I am the worst take of Ash from What Culture, and these are 10 horror movies that almost had way better endings. 10. Paxton kidnaps the Dutch businessman's child. Hostel. The ending of Hostel is pretty dark as it is, but the alternate was a lot more interesting, and would have probably made the movie that little bit more hardcore had director Eli Roth ultimately decided to include it. And that's to mention nothing of the added controversy either. In the original ending, protagonist Paxton, after being subjected to torture when he's been tricked and captured by a group who pay to kill backpackers, escapes and subsequently spots one of the men responsible for inflicting torment on him and his friends, a Dutch businessman, at a train station. He then proceeds to follow the guy into the bathroom before slicing off his fingers and drowning him in the toilet. Oh, that's not very nice, is it? The alternate ending is a real doozy though. The same thing happens with Paxton spotting the guy at the train station, only this time the Dutch businessman is with his daughter instead. Oh no. Paxton proceeds to kidnap the kid and boards a train as the film ends, which is less bloody, yes, but infinitely more menacing. Especially when you learn in the original script that it is implied that Paxton then kills her. 9. Gordo doesn't actually assault Robin. The Gift. The actual ending to Joel Edgerton's surprisingly great horror thriller movie The Gift was met with something of a controversial response. While some people loved it, others deemed it to be a bit ridiculous and ultimately far-fetched. Basically, the film ended with Gordo presenting his friend Simon, who ruined his life by telling everyone that Gordo was gay when they were kids, with a video recording showing Gordo standing over Simon's wife while she's passed out. The implication made by this is that Gordo attacked Simon's wife and that he is the real father to their baby. Ugh. The alternate ending, however, feels far more appropriate to the film. Instead of the near implausible nature of the ending that Edgerton actually opted for, the alternate ending has Gordo looming over Simon's wife, but clearly not raping her. The writer-director apparently decided against this as he thought it to be too cut and dry, but it actually offers up a more complex ending than the one in the film, as Gordo is made into a more enigmatic guy. 8. Jim dies from his gunshot wound. 28 days later. The ending of Danny Boyle's otherwise brilliant horror movie 28 Days Later has always felt like something of a cop-out, so it's no surprise to discover that the filmmakers originally planned for a darker ending. One that better matched the tone of the movie that came before it and added a nice bookended feel to the picture in the process. In the original ending, the main characters, that being Jim, Selena and Hannah, are seen hiding out in the countryside signalling for help as 3 jets fly over them. It's a happy ending, sure, but it's also a little bit boring, especially since in the scene before Jim had been shot and looked certain to die from the resulting injuries. Turns out that the original plan was for Jim to actually die, however, after being shot during the climactic scene in the mansion. His wound proves fatal and he dies on a hospital bed, which would have been the bookend, as you recall the movie also started out with Jim in a hospital bed. Selena and Hannah, left alone, are then forced to go on without him. It's a far more resonant ending and a lot more believable too. They should have kept it. 7. Rachel returns the cursed videotape to a video store. The Ring. Both the Japanese horror film Ringu and its American remake, The Ring, stand as 2 of the most iconic horror movies of all time. So it's a big shame that the American movie missed out on using a cool alternate ending, which would have given people a lot more to talk about when compared to the one that the studio ultimately opted for. In the original ending to the movie, Rachel burns the cursed VHS tape after discovering that if you make a copy and show someone else, said curse is lifted. In an effort to save Aiden, her son, who has also seen the tape, she helps him make a copy. It's then left ambiguous as to who they decide to send that copy to. In the alternate ending, however, Rachel puts the copy tape in the sleeve of a film she previously rented at the video store. It's then revealed said tape has been moved to the employee pick section, a reference to the fact that whichever employee found it is trying to pass it on to the next person. This version of the ending is a mere extension of the original, but one can't help feel that there was more value in including it. 6. Sue gives birth to Carrie. Carrie. There was never any reason to remake Carrie, even if a modern version featuring the likes of Chloe Grace Moretz seems like a good idea at the time. One of the most disappointing things about the remake, however, was the ending, which brought absolutely nothing new to the Carrie name. The film ends with a shot of Carrie's tombstone, which, as we hear Carrie screaming somewhere in the background, proceeds to crack. It's a lame riff on the ending of Brian De Palma's original version, and it doesn't really work. It's crazy to think that the filmmakers decided to opt for that ending rather than an alternate one that saw some really crazy stuff go down. In one particularly nutty potential ending, the character of Sue experiences a lucid nightmare in which she literally gives birth to Carrie. Carrie's arm actually extends out from inside Sue's vagina and proceeds to grab at her arm. It's disgusting, weird, and totally unforgettable. Perfect, and yet, nope. No vagina horrors. Poor form, guys. 5. Ash sleeps too long and wakes up in a post-apocalyptic nightmare. Oh, sounds about right. Army of Darkness. When Army of Darkness was released in the United States, the studio decided to opt for a cool and relatively happy ending, whilst the UK version of Army of Darkness was tagged with a bleak and depressing twist of an ending. The US version of the film is deemed to be the official one, but the alternate ending, the one used in the UK, was far more in line with Sam Raimi's horror comedy franchise's existing tone. The original ending then sees Ash returning from the medieval era after he drinks a magic potion that allows him to go to sleep and subsequently wake up in his own time. He goes back to working his regular job at the supermarket before being attacked by deadites during a shift, which he fends off like a badass. The movie then ends on this groovy note. The alternate ending, however, is far darker and a lot more Evil Dead. Ash accidentally drinks too much of the potion and ends up sleeping longer than he's supposed to. When he awakens, the world has been destroyed and everything is bleak and gone. The movie ends with Ash shouting, "I slept too long, I slept too long," which is both hilarious and actually incredibly sad. And relatable. Very relatable. 4. The rest of Randy's videotape. Scream 3. The original ending of Scream 3 lacks any twists, and opts to end the series on a happy note, which is fair enough, but not particularly reminiscent of the franchise. After discovering Roman to be the murderer, Dewey shoots him in the head. Later, Dewey proposes to Gail, and then they invite Sydney over to watch a movie. The film ends with Sydney, finally convinced nobody's going to try and murder her, not locking her door. The alternate ending, however, would have involved all of that with the addition of the rest of Randy's tape, which was glimpsed earlier in the movie when he outlined the rules of being in the third film of a horror trilogy. According to the script of the film, Randy would have spoken the following dialogue before the movie would have ended for real. "Hey guys, so this tape is the guide to my movie collection. I know you think I'm the horror movie guy, but there's all kinds of other genres in life too, you know? So I wanted to share some more of my favourites. How about we start with a little comedy, huh? How about a little happy ending?" Which would have nicely brought the trilogy full circle. Except for reasons unknown, the studio didn't opt to use it. They just went for Sydney leaving the door unlocked instead. 3. The Golden Gate Bridge is covered in birds. The Birds. The ending of Alfred Hitchcock's classic The Birds is already rather iconic. After a horrific night of fighting off hellish winged creatures bent on murdering them all, the cast of characters, which is Kathy, Lydia, Melanie and Mitch, look outside and discover that the birds have stopped going crazy and are standing completely and utterly still. With no choice but to make their way outside, they get into a car and drive off through the silence. It's very strange and very eerie because there's no explanation as to why the birds suddenly decide to stop attacking all the humans. Then the credits start to roll. Though this ending is great, Hitchcock originally played around with the idea of using an arguably more epic ending instead. He wanted to go big. And so the director wanted the movie to end with the family arriving in San Francisco, only to discover that the entire length of the Golden Gate Bridge is covered in birds. It was never shot, however, because it was seen to be something of a logistical nightmare. Still, it would have been very cool. 2. Hercules is castrated by the freaks and forced to sing soprano. Freaks. Todd Browning's nightmarish 1932 horror film, Freaks, has already got a really great ending, one that sticks in your memory long after the picture is over. After being abused and mistreated for the sum of the film, the freaks of the title, those being exploited circus performers of all shapes and sizes, turn against those who have made their lives a misery. In a terrifying sequence, the freaks crawl through the rain and the mud and attack the villains, Venus and Hercules. The film ends with Venus having been transformed into a human duck, her limbs torn from her body and her hands melted down into wings. Hercules, however, disappears from the movie without a trace, so what happened? There was an alternate ending, of course, which really would have given the film that added brilliance. This climax would have seen Venus turned into the human duck as usual, but Hercules would have also met a horrible fate. A scene at the end of the film would have shown him being forced to sing soprano in the circus, having been castrated by the freaks. Yes, castrated. Sadly, test audiences thought it all too much and it was cut. Boo! 1. The orphan goes back to the house and acts like nothing happened. Orphan. At the end of the rather terrifying horror flick Orphan, the killer, which is Esther or Lena, whichever you prefer, is kicked square in the face by Kate as she attempts to save her daughter. Esther takes a tumble into the depths of an icy lake and dies, her neck broken. It's a satisfying ending, that's for sure, but reading the alternative version, you can't help but feel as though opting to use it might have had more of an impact on audiences than the otherwise generic finale that the movie ultimately sticks with. That's to say, Orphan's alternative ending saw Kate rescuing Max, only for the orphan to return to the house and start calmly reapplying her makeup. The police arrive at this point, whilst Esther acts all sweet and innocent as though nothing has happened. The implication here being that Esther might as well be able to talk her way out of the scenario, and could possibly end up moving in with another family or have killed Kate and Max. Which, you have to admit, is all really, really creepy. Definitely the better ending, this.